Hello, welcome back to Media Snack live from New York.
Greetings from London.
So we called this episode Media Snack What's Next, and that's not because we're going to talk about particularly what's next on Media Snack, although we will come to that looking ahead for the rest of the year. I should notice actually David and I have dressed exactly the same today, which is quite coincidental and interesting. What's next is just a very quick acknowledgement of what's been, which is a kind of slightly weird 18 months for the industry, with some obviously downsides, but more recently maybe some upsides that we can just touch on briefly. But it gives us context in our look ahead and what's next. And we're doing this because those loyal viewers may have noticed from last summer, we try and take a little Media Snack hiatus in August if we can. Basically because nobody watches it, so there's no point making the episode, and then we can come back kind of refreshed in September with a kind of good agenda leading into the next year. So that's the ambition. There's been obviously a lot of change. That's been a bit of a cliche, but this industry has embraced those challenges. I think we can say. I think the marketing industry is incredibly dynamic and entrepreneurial at these times. We've seen that especially on the agency side, or kind of, let's call it partnership. So publishers and vendors and technologies and agencies and everybody else the marketer considers in their roster of partners, or their supply chain, they might call that, has been incredibly flexible in adapting to those conditions, but also used them quite well. We think we as a business have embraced the opportunities that have come along to accelerate change within our business. We could touch on that a little bit, but the industry has really embraced that. And we've seen from the brands that we work with, marketers really thinking, how am I going to be ready for what's next?
Exactly right.
And so we're kind of at that point now. We're not through this challenge, but people are starting to have now really clear plans of actually what the futures of their businesses look like. So we're just going to glance backwards for a second, but really think about what the impacts are going ahead.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's start with the Advertiser.
Yeah.
Pivotal to all of this.
Yeah, absolutely.
What have you seen, and now what are we looking at from what's next?
For years now, Tom and you and I have talked about the kind of the power of media to drive a business outcome, and the influence of media in delivering a kind of a growth agenda. But I think that momentum, that philosophy, is almost universally being embraced by the marketing community, right? You tease me about the fact that I say, media has never been higher on the corporate agenda. Well, actually, it's true. It has never been higher on the corporate.
Got to get it in for every episode.
But the conversations that we're having with not only progressive advertisers, but also those that have historically seen media as a cost, is changing the narrative. And if we kind of look back perhaps on some of the episodes that we've explored this on, one of the most pivotal one for me was when we talked to Tracy Allery from Nestle around Project Spring. This was the first time that the WFA, as the trade body, had published such a powerful manifesto around procurement, the procurement community, to link up closer with the marketing community to deliver a growth agenda. And that, I think, is such a powerful catalyst in what we're seeing now, which is, as I said, almost a universal acceptance and an understanding and a belief that media should be seen as a powerful lever in business delivery.
Yeah. And that, actually, I should have said in my introduction, is that as we go through this episode, this is not going to be an epic episode, but we are going to signpost other Media Snack episodes. Often people kind of ask us, like, when did you talk about that? And we don't know, because we can't remember, because we're getting old. But we're going to signpost a number of episodes that if you want to go deeper on any of these trends, we think these are episodes we really learned something from somebody. They're typically interview-based ones where we really want to kind of direct you towards the stuff that's really valuable. So that was episode 151, I think, is where we talked with Tracy about Project Spring. We'll link all these down below, so you've got kind of an access to those. But as we go through, we're going to call out some of the key episodes that touch on these trends.
Yeah. I mean, just kind of building on that kind of trend. I mean, one of my most favorite Media Snack Meets sessions was with the head of marketing communications at IKEA, Gianluca Toccafondi.
Mm-hmm.
And Gianluca is a brilliant practitioner of marketing and media. And within his organization, he's become so sophisticated in linking a business outcome with a media input that he's managed to institutionalize that throughout his entire organization. And that particular episode is one I think to watch, simply because he illustrates how he has used media as an input in delivering a business outcome, not only to increase his annual media investments, but interestingly to actually build deeper media resource in order to manage that media investment internally.
Yeah. And they've invested, I mean, this is what Gianluca's talking about, invested in media capabilities on the basis of a business case.
Exactly right.
That's simple as that. And that is media for growth. That is media on the corporate agenda. So all of those kind of things.
Yeah.
So that is, that's a Media Snack Meets episode. You can see Gianluca as a big IKEA banner on the thumbnail. So easy to find that. That's a really good interview to listen to.
Yeah.
And it's similar for Heineken as well. I think, I mean, your conversation with Natasha at Heineken covered similar. They're a business that's taking a serious approach to media as well.
Yeah, I mean, and that was around media for growth. That was around, future-proofing their media investments in an uncertain and dynamic kind of future. How do you drive competitive advantage in media when so much is changing in media? And what Heineken decided to do is look internally first. So operationalize themselves in a way that would future-proof themselves and establish what they consider to be best practice, structural changes internally, and then actually use that to go and get the very best out of their media agency partners. And Natasha, who kind of championed that initiative within Heineken, speaks very eloquently about the power and the influence of media internally, how it's seen as an investment, and also how those strategies have been implemented internally to maximize the value of those media investments and deliver competitive advantage.
Yeah, so it's good. So we've done a whole series of different episodes around a theme which we call media for growth, which is the way that we've been talking about media for years and years. Media is an investment in growth, and we'll signpost you to some of those. I think episodes 160, 161, 162 was a nice kind of theme about how you should think about, how you could think about media as an investment in growth, kind of things that you need to do. And more with some more recent episodes, and around the early 200s, I think we were also doing media for growth as well. So to just finally kind of touch on the advertiser side, obviously one key trend is this idea of taking control, getting greater visibility that we talk about, and those are good episodes. We talk about the trade bodies. ISBA's new framework agreement contract is being published or has been published. A really good initiative. That's something which the trade bodies, the ISBA and the ANA particularly, have been really good at giving their members these new contract framework. They call them framework agreements. They're agency contracts essentially.
Yeah.
That's been a big part of regaining a bit of control from the advertiser. What's another trend on the kind of consumer behavior side? Because that's something that's changed hugely, right? Like a load of the brands that we work with found that in March 2020, their consumer behavior shifted hugely, and particularly those that are in any kind of creating products which get bought in shops, which is pretty much most things. Purchasing behavior changed, so therefore marketing behavior had to react very, very quickly. What have you what's the trend on that? Where are we getting the insights from that?
Well, I mean, the ability to be agile and reactive to the marketplace, I think, was best illustrated by Sarah Armitage at LVMH. I mean, LVMH is a business that traditionally have sold all of their luxury goods mostly through kind of high street stores and airports. But when the high street is closed, and when nobody's traveling in airports, they had to pivot, and suddenly their consumers went online, and they had to focus on not only reaching them online, but also enabling them to fulfill their requirements online. So their pivot, their immediate pivot to e-commerce and direct to consumer online, not only impacted the infrastructure that they needed to establish to fulfill those requirements, but also changed the way that they use their agencies, the way that they spend their money, the way that they engage with consumers. Suddenly they were no longer perhaps reading magazines, right? And they were having to really look at the way that they engage with their consumers in a highly dynamic way online. And Sarah's Media Snack Meets, I think, kind of brings that to life. But what was interesting about that conversation and the relationship that I know that Sarah and LVMH have with their agency partners is that it was hugely collaborative. So it illustrated the value of true partnership between a business that was going through a seismic, unprecedented change in the way that it had to market itself, but also the relationship with that agency partner that needed to step in and help them in these kind of tumultuous times. And so I think that was a really interesting illustration of how big businesses can pivot effectively, but really with the support of their agency partners.
Yeah, it's a great case study, and something everybody got busy, didn't they, in March last year? But I think media directors had so much in front of them. A business where, and I'm not saying LVMH is this, but other businesses are, in most companies where media is seen as a cost, not an investment. Obviously, your first job as media director is you're receiving instructions, which is cut the cost, pull everything, to protect the business. And so we had, people that we know that are media directors of large multinational businesses that were involved in literally spent 3 months just trying to pull every bit of money out of the market to shore up the business. Those businesses that see media as investment in growth were actually, and Sarah's a good example of that. We're given an opportunity to go to completely rethink the media model, completely rethink what their investment patterns were going to be, and having to really listen to the business and listen to the market, because then we really knew where it was going to kind of map out. So I think the job of the media director, if there were awards to be given out, we might do it at the end of the year. In discussions that we have with them, they've learned a lot. The business that role has been really stretched, and it's put media closer to the success of the business. That's really exciting, like that, because these big organizations look at their media director and say, this is somebody in control, steering a huge amount of the company's money, and having that person really understand how that money is being applied to provide growth to the business, I think might have been a revelation to many CMOs or CFOs or CEOs internally, that this is proper business stuff. It's not fluffy marketing.
Absolutely. And it also re-emphasized the influence of strong media governance within an organization. And a lot of the media directors that we speak to, actually, I think probably on reflection, will look back on the last 18 months and say, look, these were challenging times, but without it, we wouldn't perhaps have had the level of influence and control and decision-making that we now have. And also that kind of reflects nicely onto the agency side, because, obviously we run a lot of media reviews, and many reviews that we were preparing for pre-pandemic were paused. And, once the dust had settled, those clients, actually, those brand leaders began to realize the strength and the value of their existing agency partnerships. And so they perhaps lent away from the nuclear option, which was the pitching side of it, and just looked at recalibrating the relationship, because at a time of crisis, that's when the agency stepped in and really showed their value.
Yeah, they did. And let's come on to talk about the agencies, because pre-pandemic, we were pretty pessimistic about the future of the client agency relationship. If we go back over a year and a half, it was just felt like it was on just a slow, steady kind of decline, and you kind of weren't quite sure. Marketers were increasingly, they're demanding this control, demanding this visibility, building their own capabilities internally, kind of in-housing parts of the scope. We don't like that word, but it's easy to use. And it's almost, you could feel that the internal media team and the external agency were on some kind of eventual collision course where it just didn't work anymore. But the pandemic raised, it opened the door for agencies to really step up.
Yeah.
And we know from the last kind of economic recession, 2008, 2009, is that agencies got that wrong because they buried their heads in the sand and they stepped away from the problem and they cut headcount and they didn't engage in helping marketers through that. And it probably prolonged, it's contributed to prolong the recession. But this time we saw a difference. This time we saw, whilst agencies were cutting headcount and cutting too deep, I mean, I think they're all acknowledging that now because they're all panicking because they've got no people left. But they stepped in, and we heard again and again and again from media directors or marketing leaders who we thought would be panicking without their agency support, saying, I've really seen the true colors of my agency. They've been there for me.
Absolutely.
Just when they were needed. So bravo to all of you that kind of stepped up into that at a difficult time as well. But I think it's led us to where we are, which is that there's a lot more confidence. I think there's a lot more confidence from marketers in their agencies now than there was a year and a half ago, which has got to be good.
I agree. And also within that space, there's a greater reliance or appreciation of that agency's offering when it comes to strategic thought leadership, right?
Yeah.
It's not just about the agency being an executional partner, buying cheap media or efficient media. It's about actually providing smart, strategic, consultative support, which is going to be the future, right? That's how the agencies are going to pivot themselves in order to make themselves influential and valuable as the demands of their advertising clients change.
Yeah. So that's been good. I think it's been a good period. I mean, apart from all the bad, which we obviously put to one side at the moment, just for the purposes of this episode, but I think it's been a good way that advertisers and agencies kind of reforge those partnerships. And that, in terms of what's next, I think we've had marketers kind of reflect a little bit more on, this in-housing journey is not an in-housing journey necessarily. It's about building the right capability, structure, process, and resources internally that you should do what you're good at as a marketing organization. And then there's definitely things that you should not do, or that you don't need to do, or you could never be as good at as somebody who's closer to the marketplace or closer to kind of other best practice from other advertisers. And that's the role for the agency.
Yeah.
It brings us on to an interesting question. I mean, we're the time of year, there's a lot of trumpeting going on right at the moment. Of course, agencies don't resist the opportunity to kind of share good news because they've had a lot of bad news. They're all publishing their half-one results, and they're all making these big, bold claims that, they bounce back better and all this kind of stuff. It's a recovery. I wouldn't say that necessarily these businesses have particularly grown yet. We'll go into more of the underlying results to see if actually profitability is probably up because they've actually cut back one of their biggest expenditures, which has been headcount. But now also they're panicking about filling open positions because marketers' demand has come back alongside its budget. Agencies don't have the talent to meet those demands. The likelihood is they're going to have to overpay to fill those gaps. And so the profitability on those businesses actually may not net out well, particularly as some advertisers have taken the opportunity to renegotiate in the last 18 months as well.
Yeah.
So you might net out less profitable than you were. But anyway, we'll see. The good thing is that they're bouncing back. There's a confidence and a spring in the step of agencies. There is a massive talent gap. So, if you work with them, particularly on the media side, if you're working with a media agency, keep an eye on your talent. If there are gaps in your resource, you want to make sure that the agency is hiring to the right quality of talent, because it's almost a desperation at the moment. I think that, that's probably too strong a word, but there's a gap, and talent is the resource that you need to fight for and protect.
Yeah.
We talked a lot we have over the years about agencies kind of changing their model as well. So I don't know if you want to talk to that, but we've seen some agencies kind of come out with these consulting offers and kind of different expansion of services.
I like that because they're listening to what clients want. They're not ignoring the challenge ahead of them. As more and more businesses consider what it means to them to in-house or in-source, or what elements of the media management scope they want to perhaps consider internally and what they still want to buy, rather than just ignoring that or seeing that as a threat to their traditional livelihoods, many smart agencies are beginning to embrace that and have expanded their product offering to help nurture and curate clients' thinking around that. I mean, Essence is a good example. They've always been kind of slightly on the more progressive side of the agency community, but they've developed their own internal consulting offer that helps clients incubate the in-housing kind of notion, helping them cultivate that idea. Now, what's clever about that is that it also allows Essence or agencies that do have something similar to help evolve their own offering in order to fulfill the roadmap, presumably, that these agencies will suggest that those clients are going to sort of follow. So again, it's about future-proofing themselves, but it's about adding value. And this is about not adding, cheaper pricing value. This is about adding strategic consulting value, which is something that clients will always want, irrespective of what the dynamic marketplace is. And the more complex the marketplace, the more they will need and lean on smart solutions to help provide that kind of consulting advice.
Indeed. Which is exactly what we advised them to do 3 years ago, by the way. So I want to signpost you, if you haven't, because we can't help, saying I think we were right. But episode 118, we created what we call the WPP 2.0 playbook. This was soon after Martin Sorrell's exit from WPP, and I think Mark Reed had been just recently installed, or was predicted to be installed as the new CEO. And we thought we'd take some kind of liberties with that. And we spent an afternoon, didn't we, cutting out logos of WPP companies, and we put them on a desk and we filmed them, and we just kind of tried to completely reorganize WPP, because one of its biggest challenges was it's very, very fragmented, siloed kind of agency, and was creating some of these problems internally. One of our recommendations at that point, which I'm glad to see Mark's kind of followed the playbook like pretty much down, as we've laid out, was consolidating on the creative side, which he's been doing. So good job on that. We also predicted that Group M would take a more of a horizontal role across all the media operations, so they have more consistency of kind of platform and product. So that's kind of happening more now. We did predict that there might be the end of agency brands, the media agency brands that you would fold like a Mindshare would be folded into Ogilvy, because it's that consultative service, and then you should actually maybe offer it under the creative brand, not the media brand. I don't think we're there yet, but I would keep looking out for that, because who knows? We might see that happen. But so 118 is a quite a good episode just to understand what we think some of the dynamics of agency holding companies might be. Yeah. And then episode 120, soon after that, was called Accenture Parked their tanks on the lawn of agencies, which was quite provocative. But that's when they launched, Accenture formally launched their media agency operations. So you've got the consulting firms moving into the media buying space. You've got the media buyers moving into the consulting space. There's this potential nice big clash in the middle. That's great for the buyer. That's great for the customer. As a marketer, couldn't want anything more than that. You've got companies like us, as truly independent from the marketplace, offering a perspective and solutions as well. So you're well resourced as a media director. I mean, you've got a lot more provision now and places to go than maybe you had before, which is really good. Okay, in the time available, let's just quickly touch on just some highlights from our perspective. I think when we pick up again in September, by the way, we're coming with a really clear agenda of really just we're going to be a bit more kind of trend and predictions and future facing, because we think that's the most helpful thing to be. But we just thought we'd just take a second, just take a beat, as they say in America. I'm learning. Just to reflect a little bit on some of the things that we've done, because as a business, it's been an interesting for us. We've very, very fortunate to have been very busy in 2020 as marketers took a second to reflect and rethink their operations, as we talked about. It was a record year for ID Comms 2020, which I feel slightly embarrassed to say, but given the circumstances, but it was a year of growth, and 2021 has continued on that way. But it also allowed us to accelerate, like many other businesses, to where we wanted to be. Yeah. So operationally, I think we were always pretty strong as a business operationally. We're a team of 40 people. We span 11 time zones. That requires some coordination and communication to be good. which is sometimes a challenge, that, but you've got to make sure that that's really good. We, like every business, had to move to a remote model. We were fortunate because we were primarily a remote business at that point anyway. And we've taken recent decision to be a fully remote business from this point on. So we are not asking our teams to come back to the office because there is no office. And we did that in close consultation with the team and kind of others, and it kind of made sense. So, if we're one small indicator, we made some operational. There's many other things. We won't bore our viewers in understanding the intricacies of the operation of the business, but we took some big operating decisions. It's given us all the opportunity to kind of accelerate to where we wanted to be. And I think if others are feeling the kind of confidence and optimism I think that we have, then I think the industry might have come out in a net gain out of all of this. And I think we have accelerated to maybe where we all wanted to be a little bit more. It's not true of all categories and all industries. So I think we just count ourselves very fortunate, and we just wanted to reflect upon that.
Good.
Okay, coming up in September, we are talking about the big trends that we're going to be nailing. We're going to be smacking these out of the park. I'm bringing all my Americanisms to Media Snack.
Yeah.
KPIs.
KPIs, accountability, making deeper, stronger, more business direct links to media inputs, right? That's the future. We know that the WFA again, issued a framework for KPI setting. That's definitely going to be a big topic. You can never get away from digital transparency. The ANA have put out a tendering process to get the smartest thinkers in the world beginning to kind of address that sort of challenge. Now, if I was still a brand side marketeer and responsible for a big chunk of change, the thing that would keep me awake at night would be two things. The first thing would be the amount of money that I would waste, that I am wasting on the digital supply chain. And the second thing would be making sure that I've got the right resources, right internally, the right operating model for media internally, but also making sure that I inspire and engage the right agency talent focusing on my business. So those two things also, I think we're going to be focusing on as well.
Yeah, that's good. And the ongoing changing role of agencies, I think that there's everything that we thought might be coming true, maybe kind of bets are off. And I think it's a really good opportunity for advertisers to forge new partnerships around growth with their agencies. That's what we want to see.
Yeah.
I feel confident and optimistic about that. I think it's quite exciting. And talking to agency leadership, I think they can kind of feel that as well. There's big still underlying structural problems with agencies, and there's big, challenged business models and all that kind of stuff we'll get into. But that's going to be an interesting point of discussion, I think, and we'll get more agency leaders involved and just kind of hear more about what they want to say. Okay, so that's kind of it. Let's wrap before the half-hour mark bites us. Have a great August. We will see you in September. Thank you for watching.
Bye for now.